norms and hurdles. We're also tracking auto sector where Renault, the French car maker, is working on launching 3 new models in Indian market, including an electric vehicle in a couple of years' time. And Volvo is also looking to assemble its first ever luxury EV car and roll it out in India. A US court has temporarily blocked Microsoft's $69 billion deal to acquire Activision Blizzard, the makers of Call of Duty and Candy Crush, which would have been the biggest deal in the history of video gaming industry. And Google was charged by EU antitrust regulators with anti-competitive practices in its digital advertising business on Wednesday and may have to sell part of their business to address their concerns. All of that and more on this bulletin. With me at this point in time in the studio is my colleague Amit Ranjan. Also joining us is Karthik Malhotra. Good morning, gentlemen. Karthik, I want to come to you directly first. EPFO finally concerns around higher pension and how it will be calculated is finally out and about.
Hi, Shweta. Good morning and nice to join you remotely. Well, I think the formula has been disclosed. It is out there now, and this was something that was in the works and in the making for a very long time. Now we've been made to understand that the formula is pretty much what it was earlier. So you're looking at the formula for calculating your higher pension being your basic salary into number of years of service divided by 70. The number of years of service is capped at 35 years divided by 70. So that technically you draw half your basic salary that you were drawing until your last days in service. Now, the only clarification that seems to have come now is that this higher pension is, the formula is valid for everybody, but the cap on calculating the basic salary is up to the date of 1st of September 2014, which was the case earlier also, except that the average would be taken for 12 months in the case of those who were in service up to 1st of September 2014, and an average of 60 months of the last drawn basic salary for those in service after the 1st of September 2014. So it raised to rest a couple of issues that were unsolved for earlier. Number one, higher pension is eligible even for those who have retired after the 1st of September. And for that case, the calculation of basic salary is going to be 60 months of salary, basic salary averaged out, whereas those who retired before 1st of September, the calculation will be 12 months of last drawn basic. Now, interestingly, there is clarity also on two other aspects. Number one being that there is a cap of 6,500 rupees as higher pension for those who were in service before 1st of September. And there's a cap of 15,000 rupees for those who have been in service after the 1st of September. So that technically means that this argument of higher pension would be valid for perhaps at best somebody who has a basic salary of 30,000 rupees a month and therefore can draw up to 50% of that, which is 15,000 rupees a month for all his or her golden years of retirement. But I think anybody who has a basic salary in excess of 30,000 rupees, let's say 40,000 rupees, then 50% of your salary amounts to 20,000 rupees as pension. But that's not going to be valid because there's a cap of 15,000 rupees.
Okay, so finally some clarity there by the way of a new circular that has been put out in public by EPFO. Karthik, this is a story we've been tracking very, very closely. I want to understand for the benefit of our viewers at this point in time, why is 1st of September 2014 important? Why is that the cutoff date for all these calculations?
So actually, that is the date that the higher pension cutoff for calculation has been decided by the EPFO. Remember, this case has been on since 2016, and this whole sort of clarification required on higher pension after a gentleman went to courts and demanded higher pension for the 35 years of service he had done. So this was the year 2015, 2016, and this gentleman had retired on the 1st of September or a day prior to that, 2014. And that became the date for consideration of his pension, the person who went to court, opting for or demanding for higher pension. So for the sake of calculation, EPFO has stuck to that date, and the formulae that have been fed in and the calculation that has been done on the basis of what percentage of your salary the employer's contribution to your PF goes towards EPS, which is at 8.3% versus EPF, which is at 1.6%. And the delta that would be arrived at on the basis of opting for higher pension, the calculation window for that has been kept as 1st of September 2014.
Okay, and I don't know whether you're going to be able to answer a very important question. What happens to those who came into the workforce after 2014? Perhaps a young person in our team like Suyash, who's been wanting to get that question answered for a very long time. In fact, also addressed it to the former EPFO commissioner. If he became a part of workforce after 2014, is he eligible for higher pension?
Absolutely, yes. So that's what I think I started by saying also. Anybody who is in the workforce or continues to be in the workforce after 1st of September, the same formula is valid. The only difference would be in the case of Suyash, the calculation would not be whenever he opts to retire or retires. It would not be on the basis of 12 months of his last drawn salary, rather 60 months of his last drawn salary. And the cap would be 15,000 rupees. But I'm pretty sure, by the time Suyash retires, this cap is going to go up multiple times over, and so would the formula and the calculation.
And cap, it's interesting you mentioned the cap because it has changed consistently and it will be changed in future as well.
Exactly. So I think in 1995, the cap was set at 5,000 rupees. In 2001, 2002, it had gone up to 6,500 rupees. Eventually, it went up to 7,500 rupees. I think it's a function of inflation as well as rising salaries. So you can't stick to a 1995 present day value for, let's say, somebody who retires 30 years from now. So time value of money comes into play, and it's a function of what inflation can or what money can buy you.
And the value of the money,
time value of money.
The time value of the money, which keeps changing. So as you rightly said, the cap could be revised there. But good news there for people who've been waiting for clarity. We've been tracking this story very, very closely. There is a formula now. There is a computation method which is finally out and about in public domain. You can look at that circular, or you can go back and look at our show on how finally new pension will be calculated for those wanting to opt. But we're going to move on now. And another important story that we're tracking is with respect to Apple. A new report now suggests that Apple is likely to shift 18% of its global iPhone production to India by 2025. Now, the road ahead is not very smooth. Krishna joins us on the bulletin. Krishna, good morning to you. 18% is a substantial part of the business, mainly on the back of the shifting geopolitical gears, why India has now become a hub for Apple, why India is in the target range of Apple for producing 18% of its total output. And essentially, all of that would mean that India will become more and more important for production facilities, and states that we're looking at primarily would be Telangana and also Tamil Nadu. Both of them have been in constant loggerheads as to who's going to attract more FDI from Apple.
Absolutely, and I would call it Apple's new mantra or shloka, as you want to call it. It's called India or Bharat. That's really the case because it already manufactures a host of iPhone 13, iPhone 12, iPhone SE models out of India with its partners, Foxconn, Pegatron, and Wistron. Now the idea, currently, Shweta, 7% of the global iPhone production. 7% of all iPhones manufactured by Apple comes out of India. It is looking to take that number to 18% in less than 2 years by 2025. That's what reports are saying. And there's a reason for this, Shweta, and that is because it wants to meet the targets under the PLI scheme of the Indian government, the production linked incentive scheme of the Indian government. And to meet those targets is the reason why Apple is sort of in a hurry to increase the number of production of iPhones in India, and also, of course, as you rightly mentioned, the changing geopolitical sands. Clearly they want to move as much out of China as possible. That's already been the case. It's already opened 2 to 3 stores up, Apple stores in India. So Apple is doing the 360 from manufacturing to sales. Its next a new wave or the new world for Apple is definitely India, which is looking to explore and conquer even. And bear in mind, already 50% of India's smartphone exports is contributed by Apple. India exported about $11 billion worth of smartphones, out of which 50% of its value, don't think about the number, 50% of the $11 billion worth of smartphone exports from India belongs to Apple. That's the amount of importance that Apple has. But there will be a little bit of a problem for Apple going ahead as far as its Make in India plans are concerned, Make iPhones in India plans are concerned. And that is because, according to that very PLI scheme, there has to be domestic value addition, or DVA, domestic value addition of the vendors who supply Apple to the tune of 30%. That's the target. That's what the PLI scheme mandates. Currently, Apple's vendors have domestic value addition, value created, while manufactured in India, just about 15%, 15%. It should ideally be 30%. So Apple has to make up for that delta. It has to, going forward, make sure vendors are able to touch that 30% domestic value addition criteria, so that Apple can continue manufacturing in India. And also bear in mind that Apple is looking to expand its not just iPhone manufacturing, but of course the whole portfolio of products that Apple makes. It's trying to move as much of it as possible to India, not just the iPhones, Shweta, but then again, it will be a difficult road meeting this local sourcing, the domestic value addition criteria, because currently, just now, it just touched 20% for non-Apple smartphone production in the country, 20%, whereas the scheme mandates 30%, and Apple is currently at 15%. So it has to make up for it, even as it has ambitious plans to make more and more in India, Shweta.
Okay. I want to quickly also bring in Amit here at this point in time. Amit, the story is all the more striking, Apple's success story, because Apple, let's not forget, started its operations in India just about 22 months ago. So the time frame within which it has achieved its success in terms of about 50% of the total $11 billion smartphone exports from India, the figure, when contextualized in the time frame that it has done so, is all the more interesting.
Very interesting, and it is within 2 years of the PLI scheme also. It has gone from 110 billion exports of Apple in 2022 to 400 billion rupees in 2023. They have reached 1 billion exports per month already. That's it, and that's going to accelerate further. And like Krishna said, it is going to expand its product base that is going to manufacture India. There's already news that airports are going to be next after iPhones. So yeah, it is, and that would probably increase linkages. And as far as Indian component, I hope with Tata's coming in as one of the suppliers, taking over the Indian arm of one of their suppliers, that would also be met pretty soon. That target of 30% of Indian DEA. So I think it'll be a case study story for other manufacturers. I hope, in the electronics sector to take on.
Absolutely. And as far as localization is concerned, Krishna, Apple's vendors have already started localizing chargers, batteries. How difficult will it be to reach that 30% mark? Okay, I don't think we have Krishna with us at this point in time. Let me take that question to Karthik. Karthik, I understand that 30% is an uphill task, but as Krishna pointed out, we've already reached a DVA of average 20%. Apple is, and it's done all of that in less than 2 years' time. So how difficult will it be for Apple, do you think? How difficult is that journey to reach the 30% DVA?
See, it's definitely not easy, but is it impossible? I don't think so. What ails India's manufacturing, I think, in the short run is largely going to be batteries and semiconductors. So these are unlikely to constitute, hopefully, less than or more than 30% of what is required as components to go into Apple. But I think semiconductors is definitely one place where we are going to fall short. And batteries also, so far, the dependence on China for batteries of all kinds is going to be a challenge. Apart from that, I think everything else, from screens to other precious metals, minerals that go into the screen, the metal, all of that should not be a problem at all. And going forward, I think even semiconductors, I mean, the government is trying to incentivize the whole semiconductor industry and chip manufacturing also in India. But that's not going to be, something that can be achieved in the short run. And I give it a minimum of another 5 years or so before we would be able to start rolling out perhaps the first set of real usable multi-purpose semiconductors of our own. Until then, dependence, of course, on China, on Taiwan, on other parts of the world on semiconductors is definitely going to be there.
Absolutely. Semiconductor, and that's also a story that we discussed here, how much we have achieved, what strides we've made in semiconductor business. We have an incentive earmarked to the tune of $10 billion to make semiconductors in India, and hopefully some bids there will come through as far as semiconductor business is concerned. But Karthik, for the benefit of our viewers and also essentially how much it's going to help them if Apple were to make in India, we discussed this, and I understand you're of the belief that price point may not go down for Apple products, even if it manufactures, more than 20% for India. There could be some incentives to customers, Apple customers, people who are hoping to buy Apple products, if Apple were to increase its share of business in India.
I hate to break your heart, Shweta, but I doubt that's going to happen. See, Apple is a premium product. It's not as much about the cost of manufacturing. I doubt cost of manufacturing would be any different for a Samsung or for any other good quality smartphone. Of course, a lot goes into the R&D, and that is some place where Apple tries to maximize. A lot goes into the design, which is again, something that adds premiumness to Apple's products. But components that go into A cell phone or B cell phone are pretty much the same. Of course, the grading of those products will be different. So the quality of glass used, the quality of metal used, the quality of paint used, the sensors in the camera used, all those are definitely much better in the case of Apple, which gives them the premium edge. But it's not as much about the cost of producing one phone that determines how much you want to sell it at. In the case of premium products, it is the value that you think the consumer is deriving out of that product, and how do you maximize that value. So it's a value game, and it's not really a cost game for Apple, and hence at the cost of repeating to break your heart and many other hearts across the country.
More than mine, Krishna's heart, Karthik. More than mine, you're breaking Krishna's heart.
There will be any downward change in prices. If anything, with every new model launching, prices are only going to continue to go up.
Okay. Krishna?
Well, it doesn't break my heart at all, because what I'm looking for is more of a thriving Apple ecosystem, hardware and software, that Indians can access, because already so many Indians have bought iPhones and so many Indians are going to buy iPhones. If they can have Apple stores where they can take their iPhone to, and if they can, they can have an entire ecosystem around Apple, because so far we've been people sitting in India hoping for something to come out of the US. Even phones, once upon a time, we're looking for those, break-in phones which we can get from Dubai or from the US to a cousin or a relative. Things have changed so much since the first iPhone 3GS was launched back in the year 2008, Shweta. So much has changed. 3 stores in India. When I bought the first 3GS, everybody made fun of me. They're going to like, if this breaks, where are you going to take this? What's going to happen to you? Why do you Apple guys do this?
You're rich,
Why do you
Krishna.
spend so much money?
I think the bottom line is you've got the money, Krishna.
This used to happen, but none of that can happen right now, because despite the price point, and the good thing about the price point is that Apple has learned to break down its price points. Because there is an iPhone, if there's an iPhone 14, there's an iPhone 14 mini, and there's an iPhone 14, which is the 2 budget phones in Apple's category. And then comes the Pro, and then comes the Pro Max. So it's done great product differentiation, but as Karthik was rightly pointing out, it's not about the price. People want to pay the premium. People want to tell other people that they are capable of paying the premium to buy Apple.
Okay. Okay, Krishna, talk about yourself. You want to pay the premium. You have people like Amit who's asking his friend to get a brand new iPhone. I think he has one.
Taking on from Krishna's example of relatives, so I bought an iPhone 14 Pro Max for 98, when in India it's available for 1.4. So yeah, that is still there.
Okay, and I want to basically understand why is that, primarily, and
Apple
both
store in India.
Right.
And in case there's a problem, that's the beauty of it all. Once upon a time, if Amit were to do that, if all people who bought iPhone 3, iPhone 4, iPhone 5 through their relatives in Dubai and the US and elsewhere, once that jailbreak phone, remember that word, that was called jailbreak. Once you get that jailbreak phone and something goes wrong with it, you can't do squat. It's over. It's all over. But now you have an Apple store to go to.
Okay. But I want to understand this, for the benefit of our viewers too. Why exactly do you buy an Apple iPhone from the US, you get it from Dubai, you get it from, other parts of the world, and it's cheaper as opposed to when you're going out and buying in India? And that's why, the question whether, because it's not manufactured, the majority of it's not made in India, is that the reason why it's expensive here in India? And will that then go away once Apple looks at India as its manufacturing hub? Karthik here disagrees with me.
Taxation, Shweta, one simple word, taxation. We tax Apple.
All right.
Okay, we seem to have lost Karthik there, but I think taxation, Krishna, yes.
Absolutely. I was about to say that taxation is definitely an issue, and also purchasing power parity, as far as, how many Indians can afford a phone of that value with that, with the value of the rupee, bear in mind. Because what goes into the iPhone is dollar benchmarked, and we are buying it here in rupee. So there is already that delta that we need to account for, and of course, the taxation that foreign manufacturers and foreign players in India have to go through that Karthik was talking about. But here is the good story. Despite all of that, I never, in 2023, when we discussed the pricing of the iPhone, it's a little confusing for me, because if it was the pricing that was the deterrent, people would have stopped buying iPhones by now. Now, I think salaries have only gone up since the iPhones were first launched. People's propensity and people's aspirations have only gone up since the first iPhone was launched. So to me, it's not a question of pricing anymore. It's always a question of the ecosystem. Can you buy all Apple products, get them serviced? If there is a problem, take them somewhere. Which Apple fans for the longest time, for decades, did not in India. People who bought the iMac, forget the phones. People who bought the iMac computers had nowhere to take it to if there was a problem with it. That's why only one of them took it to Tim Cook on the day of the launch of the first store in Mumbai. So, those problems go away. And those are very important. I mean, think about it. How did a Microsoft Windows become so famous and those computers become famous? Because there's a problem, you could take it somewhere. There was more trust, there was more reliability. There's an environment that supports it. So Apple is moving towards that. As far as manufacturing is concerned, well, I think it's purely a prerogative of Apple to make sure it is manufacturing from a place where it's safe, from all the global regulations. It's cost-wise effective. All these factors make India a great place to manufacture for Apple. So there is no rocket science over here as to why Apple wants to manufacture more and more out of India. It's not about bringing down the
Krishna, my basic question also to Karthik at this point in time, and we lost Karthik while he was speaking. Karthik, if it was about taxation and import duty when we were importing iPhone, now that we are making in India, shouldn't there be less taxes?
Exactly.
No, it wasn't about import duty. It was largely what is your GST on white goods? What is your GST on electronics? And that is what was higher in case of cell phones. And by value of percentage, a higher priced product is going to add a higher absolute value on the same GST rate, let's say across a Samsung or a Vivo or a Xiaomi. A more expensive phone is going to add a higher GST, and hence the price accentuates even further.
Okay. All right, interesting discussion, debate. I can go on, and I think Amit here is also hoping he can add up to this discussion. It is interesting, pertinent to a lot of people who are looking to buy a premium phone. Not everybody can afford. Krishna, of course, being the richer of the lot here. But for the rest of us who can barely afford an iPhone 12...
More aspirational of the lot.
Okay, let me rephrase that.
If it is a question of the rich, so many iPhones would not be sold in India.
Okay.
Because there's not that many rich here in India.
Okay, let me rephrase that. Is the aspirational of the lot of us here. But we're going to move on now to another important story that we're tracking, and that is coming in from auto space at this point in time. Renault is looking to launch more cars in India and primarily looking at EV business. Krishna, EVs, the big talk of the town, electric vehicles, both Renault and Volvo, from Volvo's kitty as well, is going to come the luxury EV car that will be made in India or assembled in India.
It's the car that Karthik should be looking to buy when it launches in August, if I would say, knowing that he's equally aspirational as I am from mobiles to cars.
The Renault Quid.
Right? So what I was trying to say was basically this, that this is the second luxury, second EV from Volvo stable in India. There's a C40 Recharge, is a coupe version of its XC40, which was its first EV in India. And this is a proper luxury EV. It's meant to go against the BMW Mini Coupe and the likes of that, a cool looking coupe car. That's what Renault is looking to launch. August is when it officially launches. It has just unveiled the C40 Recharge. Again, a car that is looking to maximize on technology. Being an EV, it also comes in loaded with a big screen, sunroof, you name it. I've been to the launch of the BMW Mini Coupe when it launched in India many years ago, and it really reminds me of that in terms of its shape, size, and what it's looking to do. Very similar to the BMW Mini Coupe. Volvo making a statement, and it's interesting that now you have luxury cars being launched, electric versions of luxury cars being launched, and even Volvo is not left out. And bear in mind, this can go from 0 to full charge in just 33 minutes, in just about half an hour's time. And in that charge, you can take it up to 530 kilometers. That's the kind of power that the Volvo C40 Recharge is expected to come with. And we'll have to wait and watch how the luxury car customers in India, because bear in mind, you've seen everybody from Mercedes to BMW launch luxury electric vehicles. So that market is heating up as well, even as the budget luxury budget electric vehicle market explodes. You have the luxury electric vehicle, passenger vehicle market that is exploding as well. And Volvo also introducing its second variant is a testament to that. And Shweta, it is not just Volvo that is driving into the electric wave in India. It's also Renault, because Renault, another international car maker who has been in India for a long time, has just finished rolling out its 1 millionth car in India. So Renault has manufactured over 1 million cars, and it's now looking to hit the 2 million mark by the year 2030. And that will be driven mostly by electric vehicles. Renault too is looking to introduce 2 new electric vehicles, although Renault comes in the regular budget car market segment. So what the point I'm trying to make is that from Renault introducing 2 new electric cars going forward, apart from 4 new variants, bear in mind the Renault currently has the Kiger, the Triber, and the Quid in the Indian market, 3 cars. It's going to introduce 4 new models and 2 new electric vehicle models from the Nissan stable. So from Nissan to Volvo, from budget to luxury, electric vehicles, electric cars are certainly the way forward, and they're coming with more and more loaded with technology, loaded with fun features that consumers will go for. So, India is primed for an explosion as far as electric cars are concerned, Shweta.
Okay. Interesting, Krishna, because we also discussed fresh investment that could come in by the way of Renault, of course, looking to invest as much as 5,300 crore rupees with its partner Nissan in India on the growing and buzzing market around EV in India. We also have other players who could be eyeing that market, Volvo being one, and then you have MG Motors. So more and more players, of course, looking at India as an EV hub. And we discussed this story yesterday as well, because it's a story of growth. It's a story of India adopting EVs at a very fast clip. Penetration at this point in time is approximately 1%, over 1%, and therefore all the more opportunities for all these big players to be eyeing India for EV business. And as far as infrastructure is concerned, and that of course was an interesting discussion with Karthik yesterday on how infrastructure will also be rolled out eventually as and when more electric vehicles hit the market.
Right. Infrastructure, charging ecosystem, all of these are challenges that continue to remain, but we've only made progress in the last couple of years, and that was witnessed in the kind of sales that electric vehicles witnessed in the last year. Last year, more than 1 million electric vehicles were sold in India. That's the kind of number that we have in India at this point in time. We're looking at a situation where, currently Volvo gets about 27%. For example, Volvo gets 27% of its sales from electric vehicles, and it's looking to double that. And so is every other company, because every other company knows that very soon, when I say very soon, we're talking about 5-year, 10-year horizon maximum. In the next 5-year, 10-year horizon, most car companies want to make sure that nearly 50% of their sales come from electric vehicles. And that's the reason why you see everybody from Volvo to Renault doing that. It's interesting that in India, even as the budget passenger vehicle segment in the electric vehicle segment is exploding, there is growth and variation in the luxury car market, as a luxury segment as well, and that's what Volvo's second new luxury electric vehicle launch in India means. So we'll have to track both these things, Shweta. How is the budget consumer adopting EV, and how is the luxury consumer converting his aspirations, luxurious aspirations, into electric aspirations?
Electric aspirations, of course, for a lot of people, but what's killing those aspirations, Karthik, is the high prices. A lot of people who are hoping to buy EVs are also deterred from buying EVs due to high prices. Can we see some movement there on price point? Could we see EVs getting any cheaper with more players eyeing Indian market?
So how does the Indian consumer continue to buy cars? I think the kitna deti hai concept is as relevant today as it was maybe in the 1990s and earlier when we saw the plethora of cars coming into Indian roads. So I think for the typical Indian mindset calculation, you're still looking at a per kilometer cost. How much does it cost you to drive your car for 1 kilometer? Fixed cost plus variable cost, both included. So there is no doubt in the long run, if you hold on to an electric vehicle for, let's say, a time span of 15 years, which is comparable with a petrol vehicle, which you hold on to for 15 years on, let's say, the roads of Delhi. And if you were to calculate the mileage your petrol car gives you per liter of petrol, and the prices of petrol also going up year on year, versus the mileage that you get on every electric charge to your EV and the number of kilometers you drive. And when you take into account both these fixed and variable costs, there is no doubt that it is in the long run much cheaper to own and drive an electric vehicle, right? So I think that is one thing which is surely going to drive penetration of EVs into India. Now, the second part is that, of course, the fixed cost for buying an EV is much higher than buying a conventional fuel car, which means you're either spending more money or taking a higher loan and paying a higher EMI to own an EV. But keep in mind that there, last 2 years in the budget, there was an incentive, a tax incentive on purchasing an electric vehicle for the end consumer. And thereafter, of course, through FAME, there is a subsidy on electric vehicles in general. But let's leave those jargons aside for now. Come back to the moot point that it is going to be more expensive to buy an EV as compared to a conventional car. But in the long run, it is going to be cheaper to own and run an EV. But now, with the battery swapping infrastructure also likely to come in, the cost of EVs, of buying an EV, is going to reduce drastically. So upfront, you pay for the cost of the car minus the battery, and you take the battery on rent. So it's a lease and swap facility. It'll take time for it to get launched, but the idea is fairly novel, that you buy your car, but you lease the battery. And every place you go to when you want to recharge, instead of recharging, you swap your battery for a fully charged battery. So if you're able to build this infrastructure, and if you're able to create availability of batteries and swapping infrastructure along with charging infrastructure available at scale, I think it's going to bring down prices, ownership prices to begin with. The calculation of cheaper long-run value of owning an EV, coupled with this convenience of swapping, not waiting for your battery to be charged and immediately swapping and moving on, is really going to be a game changer for the EV market. And that is when we will see penetration really go deep inside India's consumption.
Okay. Obviously, the cost benefit of it to the end user, while adopting or while taking to electric vehicles initially could be high, the upfront cost could be high, but as Karthik rightly pointed out, it gets cheaper as you use it, as far as your mileage is concerned, to the longevity of an EV car, to how much you can drive and not pay up for fuel. But as far as infrastructure concerns, infrastructure would also be taken care of with battery swapping coming into play. So all of that augurs well for those who are hoping to buy an electric vehicle. Remember, as we are tracking this story, more and more players are looking to enter Indian market, woo the existing EV customers as well as those who could be taking to electric vehicles very, very soon. But we're going to move on now to another important story that we're tracking, and that is with respect to Microsoft losing its bid, at least temporarily, by the way of a court judgment. Karthik, the deal, if it were to go through, a $69 billion deal, if I'm not wrong, could have paved way for one of the biggest mergers and acquisitions in the gaming industry. What is the deal about, and why did the US court put a full stop, at least temporarily, on it?
So, Shweta, if you remember, this actually came up in the EU antitrust courts also last month, and EU was trying to block Microsoft's acquisition of Activision. And thereafter, Microsoft had taken to the US courts, and now the US courts seem to have upheld this decision of barring Microsoft from going ahead and acquiring Activision. Now, Activision is a large gaming company, and it owns and sort of produces and has a license for games such as Candy Crush and Call of Duty. Both of those games have been pretty much legendary in the gaming space across the world, and they've cut through social barriers and cultural and geographic barriers and really made Activision a very, very valuable company. $69 billion is the valuation. Now, for the gaming industry, this thus far is the biggest bid for a deal to have gone through. But yeah, Microsoft's entry into the gaming sector is being seen as perhaps anti-competitive, and it comes at a point where there is talk of breaking up big tech into smaller subsidiaries and smaller companies, and not letting them control a lion's share of any industry, right, so to speak. So we're also looking at Google, and we're looking at how Google is also up against antitrust in the US for anti-competitive practices. So broadly, it's a function of big tech not being allowed to get into every large business and increase their monopolies, even in industries that they are not existing in and want to enter. So those seem to be the main reasons why this deal is being blocked both in the EU as well as in the US.
Okay. Amit, from what we are given to understand, Microsoft has been trying to get an approval for this merger worldwide. While many countries have agreed, US and UK have proved to be dampener for this big deal. And at this point in time, there is, of course, a temporary halt on the deal. The deal cannot go through, at least in the US, which is where it was supposed to go through. What does this mean for the gaming industry? Why are there trust issues with this particular deal?
Well, it is a case of abuse of dominance, if I may put it that way. Candy Crush is the biggest, most popular game. Even the surveys say so. Call of Duty is very popular. After this deal, Microsoft's ex-boss would have gotten exclusive access to everything that Activision Blizzard has produced, leaving Nintendo and PlayStation out in the cold. So that is abuse of dominance. So that is one reason why this whole thing of basically, if I may put it broader, the FANG big tech companies trying to get monopolize right, their businesses, right, in whichever fields they are in. Mm-hmm. So that is one. And the other one is they are opposing it as far as the modalities go. They have to, Microsoft and Activision have to submit their legal arguments opposing the preliminary injunction by the 16th of June, and the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, has to reply to that by the 20th of June. That is tomorrow and few days from now. Okay. So that is what the modalities look like in the near future. But again, I'll come back to that phrase, abuse of dominance. That is what Europe and America commissions are opposing.
Opposing.
trying to
Essentially,
oppose.
and from what we know, the Federal Trade Commission took Microsoft to court over this particular deal last year as well. They didn't want the merger to go through. They have brought in at least a temporary injunction during which time they cannot be a merger. But if merger were to go through, your argument is, and the argument of course of the Trade Commission is in both the US and the UK, that this would lead to just one single player and kill competition. That is what anti-competitive boils down to.
Yes.
And that is interesting because there are very limited few players in the gaming industry.
Yes, and like again, the big tech companies, they are in whichever field they are being accused of these practices in different countries. You look at across the board. Alphabet has been accused of it.
Right.
Microsoft has been accused of it. So they are trying to monopolize their businesses, and they are allowed to do so. But yeah.
And since you brought in Alphabet, let's quickly move to that story as well. Google has essentially now been facing the antitrust commission in EU especially going out against Google openly at that, saying that Google has engaged in anti-competitive practices in its advertising business. What exactly are the charges?
Google controls 28% of market share already in ad tech.
Ad tech,
Okay.
yes.
79% of Google's total revenue last year came from ad tech, whether it was from Gmail, Google Play, Google Maps, YouTube adverts, Google Ad Manager, and that totally amounted to 224.5 billion of revenue. Now, again, it is an abuse of dominance case. European Commission set out the charges after 2 years of investigation. So it took they took their time, basically building their case against Alphabet or Google, which basically amounts to anti-competitive practices again. To counter this, Google may have to sell part of its ad tech business. It may be that deep. They may not be. They have tried to settle it in the past. They tried to settle it even 2 years ago when the investigation started, but they have not been able to do so. If this goes through, they may have to sell a part of their ad tech business just to basically settle this thing, and it will be the European Commission is basically trying to set a precedent for other companies also.
Right.
So that is why such a strict measure being taken.
Okay.
So that's where things stand right now.
Absolutely. And let's quickly go to what the charge is. And Karthik, I would want you to come in at this point in time. What we are hearing and what we are learning is that Commission has issues with Google favoring its own online display of advertising technology, the ad exchange called AdX, in the ad selection. So essentially the charge here being that they are favoring their own business and hence killing competition.
Absolutely. So it is the antitrust regulator in the EU which has charged Google with anti-competitive practices. So primarily the charge is that, see, how does the whole ecosystem, advertising ecosystem work? You log on to the internet, and by default, most people log on to, let's say, Google Chrome or any website powered by Google, whether it is Google Search, Gmail, YouTube, the works, all of it, the entire suite. So you log on to that, and anytime an ad comes to you, who fires up that ad? There is an ad exchange that sort of displays this ad out, and there is an ad server which pushes this ad through right till the hub where you are receiving your ad from. So both the ad server as well as the ad exchange are technically in an open market. Anybody should be able to bid for an ad, and these odd ad auctions, when they take place, ideally any server and any DFP and any ad server or ad exchange should be at a level playing field. But Google has been charged with favoring, the algorithm developed by Google has favored in these natural auction processes to give preference to AdX, which is Google's own ad exchange. And as a result, whatever money the exchange makes out of any ad that an advertiser wants to display to an end user, Google is the one who ends up making money. So overall, if you look at the whole story around the internet, there is no doubt in my mind that Google is the one and only most dominant internet player in the world. And that is making regulators and authorities worldwide very jittery because of the kind of power that Google has at its behest. And like Amit very, very rightly said, this is abuse of dominance, which is either playing out already or could play out in a much higher measure even anytime in the future. So that is why the regulators, before the problem gets completely out of hand, want to step in and tell Google that, hey, we want you to break up your ad business. Your ad business is a giant in itself. Let's say we want Ad Exchange to work as a separate entity, a separate company, AdSense to work as a separate company, AdWords to work as a separate company, thereby not giving one entity enormous power, rather breaking it up into multiple parallel businesses. But the point still, begins to be answered that even if you were to break it up into smaller companies, and as long as the management of those smaller companies is run by Google, will it make much difference? I think one thing that it would make a difference on, keep operations aside, is the overall valuation of one entity called Alphabet or one business called Google. In terms of pure valuation, it will be broken up into smaller baskets. But per se, in operations, will it matter much? I don't know really. I doubt it, because the management is going to be, the same, and appointed CEO these respective businesses would be done by let's say Sundar Pichai, if that were to happen tomorrow. But I think parallelly, what is also playing out in India is equally interesting. So Competition Commission of India has actually challenged NCLAT's order and moved Supreme Court against NCLAT, because NCLAT incidentally freed Google of 4 out of 10 charges that CCI had imposed on Google. And I'll quickly just read those out. So the tribunal, NCLAT, had actually favored Google in the aspect of sending out warnings to users to download applications directly from their website. NCLAT had said, yeah, Google is free to do that. There's no problem, right? Second, it said not being compelled to share its open API application programming interface with third-party vendors. Third was keeping control on which applications can be installed on Google devices. Google had then cited that, it is, we want to protect malware and we want to protect our users malware. And the fourth one specifically was users not being allowed to uninstall the pre-built Google apps from their phones. Right. So these are 4 things that NCLAT had allowed in favor of Google. But Competition Commission of India is saying nothing doing, my friend. I'm taking you to Supreme Court and challenging.
Absolutely. And some relief there for Google at this point in time. But as far as EU is concerned, some very damning provisions that EU is asking, the Commissioner is asking Google to make, and primarily that a behavioral change is not enough. We want you to, separate your business. We want some sort of disinvestment. You have to part ways with a part of your business, and that could perhaps address the big problem around anti-competitive practices. Important story. We'll keep bringing you more updates on that, but that's all we have in this bulletin. Thanks very much for watching.
In January 2023, Gautam Adani was the world's 3rd richest person. Bloomberg had recently announced that he'd made more billions than anyone else on the planet in 2022. He was the darling of investors. Then, disaster struck. On January 24th, a US-based short seller alleged share price manipulation and accounting fraud. Adani's stock prices crashed. In less than 10 days, his companies lost over 8 lakh crore rupees in valuation. Adani is now the world's 30th richest person. He acted swiftly, though, to contain the damage. And yet, he's holding on to the Dharavi redevelopment project. He will invest 25,000 crore rupees to redevelop Asia's largest slum. But why?
Somebody like an Adani would definitely love to take it up and complete it.
Dharavi will be Mumbai's biggest commercial hub after its redevelopment. Adani will be the biggest commercial landholder.
Dharavi could generate 6 lakh crore rupees a year once it is redeveloped. This can serve Adani in 2 ways, commercial and social. Gautam Adani could turn savior and savvy investor, a slumdog billionaire, if you will.